Hi friend, thanks for joining me for another video blog. I hope this video finds you well, healthy, and thriving. Today I want to bring a subject of patterns and behaviors. Do you ever wonder where some of your feelings, perceptions, patterns, behaviors come from? It's pretty easy for many people to go back to childhood because they had a major trauma like abuse, neglection, or something traumatic happened with their parents, like the loss of a parent. For some of these people, it's obvious where some of the patterns come from. Doesn't mean they're resolved, but at least they understand that it comes from there. And then for many of us who did not have a major trauma, and we say, I had a good childhood. I worked with many clients in the past who came to me with overwhelmed feelings of anxiety, experienced depression, and were just experiencing a lot of mental, emotional, and physical stress. And yet they would say, I had a good or sometimes even a great childhood. So I want to talk about this today. When we say I had a good or great childhood. Sometimes it takes 5, 10, even 20 sessions with a client to help my client to see that all their insecurities, self-doubt, sense of like I'm not good enough, sense of imposter syndrome, basically to help them to see that all their patterns and perceptions, especially the ones that are not serving them, they all were created during their childhood. And again, for a lot of clients, it's very hard for them to see that, to perceive that it came from their childhood, because when they look at their childhood, all they can see, the model they can see for themselves is that there's no trauma there. Everything was great. This is a big conversation because we need to clarify first what trauma really is. Trauma, yes, can be the obvious: sexual abuse, molestation, physical abuse, emotional abuse, growing up with alcoholic or, with parents with drug addictions, or when there's abuse between the father and the mother. So, of course, there's like the clear trauma. And there's also other traumas that we don't address, or we address once you work with a coach, with a therapist, or start reading some books about trauma. The trauma I want to talk to you today is a trauma that is not obvious and clear for many of us, which is the trauma of not being seen, not being held emotionally by our parents and caretakers. So there's a great confusion around trauma because we just look at trauma as this big thing. If there's nothing big that happened in our childhood, then our childhood was good. We had, safety, we had shelter, we had food, we have good school, and we have a good childhood. Overall, we can say that, but we got to go much deeper than that. And I want to ask you a question. If you didn't have major trauma, what you call major trauma in your childhood, let me ask you this. Did you grow up or came to an environment and you were born where there was a lot of stress within your parents? Maybe your father was experiencing a lot of stress, like anxiety and overwhelm. Maybe your mother was experiencing postpartum depression, or there's an illness in your mother or father or your caretaker. So did any of you came to a world where there was a lot of stress within your caretaker, your mother or father? And when we come to a world where we are received by stressed out parents, and a lot of us did, I did. My parents were very stressed out. My mother was in a marriage that she didn't want to be in. My father would not give her a divorce. He would threat her. So there's definitely emotional, verbal abuse there towards my mother. So I grew up, especially for the first 9 years, in a very stressed out environment. Also, I was raised by my grandmother, and my grandmother was very stressed. She had a lot of grief, a lot of anger, sadness, because her husband left her with 6 children. So she was a single mother, cleaning houses to raise 6 children. One of those children was my mother. So I was in an environment with my grandmother and my parents doing the best they could, and yet I was exposed to a lot of stress. That's trauma, and we need to start having this conversation, because what happens in that environment is that we're not seen or held emotionally by our parents. For example, how many of us, I was one of them, how many of us were not really embraced or even allowed to express our anger or sadness, to cry? And that's because our parents didn't have the emotional intelligence, the emotional awareness for themselves. They didn't know how to self-regulate their own emotions, and therefore, of course, they didn't know how to help us as children to self-regulate, to help us to self-regulate. Because as a child, we need our parents or caretakers to help us, to teach us how to regulate our own emotions. So imagine that situation that you as a kid, as a 3-4-year-old, you are angry or sad, and there's nobody there to hold a space for you to feel safe and to process those emotions. Right there, we all had an experience of trauma. And through those experiences, we all made unconscious decisions because we little kids. We can't make conscious decisions because we don't have an intellectual brain yet. We made unconscious decisions based on the messages we're getting from our caretakers. And those messages given to us can be messages in the form of body or face expressions. So if we do something or say something and we read a face expression of our mother, for example, that it's judgmental or critical, right there's a message that's given to us that what we are feeling or doing is not okay, is not accepted. And therefore, as little kids, we start shutting down those parts of ourselves. Same thing if we want to express an emotion and a mother or father says something like, it's wrong, suck it up, don't cry, or go to your room, deal with your emotions yourself. So in those moments, we all made decisions to become somebody else, to start developing our personalities, which will be another video, because as children, we would do anything in order to feel seen, validated, and loved. We actually protect our parents. And if our parents are not happy, as children, we take that very person and we think that it's because we did something wrong. And that's when trauma begins. So this can be, I know, dark, because pretty much all of us grew up with stressed out parents. And at the same time, I find it super liberating because it helps us to understand how our programs and conditioning were installed in us. And a lot of times, if we experience depression, overwhelm, anxiety, anger, sadness, we can understand that it might be coming from that program, and there is nothing wrong with us. There's nothing to fix. Like, clients come to me saying, please fix me, or I am broken, and I always say, I can't fix you, and there's nothing broken with you. Just your program is broken. Maybe your thinking is broken, but not you. So the whole process of healing is about wholeness. It's about us walking back, returning to our heart or to our essence. Who were we before those traumas got imprinted in us? And we all were worthy. We all felt worthy as little babies. We all felt valuable. We all felt loved. We all felt enough. We all felt strong. We all felt lovable until those traumas came in. So the path of healing, the journey of healing that I take my clients on, is basically guiding my clients back to their truth. Just back to their truth. That's why I say I never teach anything new to my clients. I want to read a quote here for you that was shared with me by Dr. Gabor Mate, that says, when the child is in between 1 and 3 years old, being seen is a fundamental necessity. When we are not seeing, we can only conclude that who you are is not good enough. So when we are not seen as babies, as children, we take that as we are not good enough. And that's why 99.9% of people have some kind of perception about themselves that they're not good enough. I definitely had that. I worked 2 years with a therapist because I didn't think I was smart enough, and I felt there's something wrong with me. That has been cleared and healed, and healing is a journey. I continue healing other things. And how do I know I need more healing? Because I have triggers. Another video about that. The continuation of this quote: your parents' failure to see your real nature doesn't mean that they don't love you. Love isn't the same as actually seeing who you are. So that is to conclude this video, is to say that we were all loved by our parents, there's no doubt. So this path of healing and going back to our childhood is not about becoming a victim or blaming our parents or caretakers for our misfortunes or challenges. It's actually a path of empowerment and liberation. They did the best they could with what they knew. And we need to remember that our parents were also children, victims of trauma. That's why I studied generational trauma. Many of us are carrying 7, 8, maybe even 10 generations of trauma. So that's why we need to bring compassion, self-compassion first, to do our own work, and compassion for our parents. This is not about going back and confront your mom or your dad if they're still alive and telling them what a bad job they did. Opposite of that. It's actually to learn compassion again for yourself and compassion for them, and therefore we heal the trauma. And by healing our trauma energetically, we also healing the trauma of our parents or ancestors and also future generations, which again is another video. So if you're curious about exploring, if you are courageous and curious and want to explore this path and understand better where your overwhelming emotions come from, or maybe a sense that you're not good enough, maybe a sense of perfectionism, if you want to explore that, I'm offering 3 sessions for new clients for a slide scale. So you're gonna save hundreds of dollars if you sign up to do 3 sessions with me, where I will specifically take you through a journey of exploring your own patterns, your perceptions, your behaviors in a way that feels like empowerment, an empowering journey where you're not a victim, where you become radically responsible. And with that, you have the tools to let those perceptions and feelings go, because the truth is we cannot change our past, and we have tremendous power to change our perception or interpretation of what happened with us, and we have the power because of that to change our feelings and our state of being. And from that, we start having new experiences, like we have a new life. And really what we're doing is returning back to our essence, returning back to our hearts. So I'd love to explore this with you. If you're interested in doing these 3 sessions with me, just book a call, send me an email, and we can get you started. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you again. Have a great weekend.